It was meant to be just another family outing, a cheerful lunch to mark Liam's 18th birthday. But as so often happens, things didn't go as planned. My husband Matthew, as usual, was swallowed up by his work, shutting himself away in his home office. I busied myself in the kitchen, washing dishes and lifting warm pies from the oven, their sugary aroma wrapping itself around me. I let myself dream of a day bursting with laughter, sunshine, and the kind of family closeness I'd been missing. Yet underneath, I couldn't help but wonder, when exactly had the smooth surface of our life begun to split, like old furniture cracking at the seams? Everything felt fragile, as if the slightest push might send it all tumbling down. To our neighbors, we were the ideal American family. A pretty suburban house with a tidy lawn, well-behaved kids, always smiling and neatly dressed. But I knew the truth. Only I could see the shadows creeping into what should have been a safe, comfortable world. Matthew was endlessly busy, always with something urgent to do, yet somehow never truly present. He floated through our days like a ghost, vanishing into conference calls and never-ending meetings. And me? I'd become achingly, desperately alone. At the beach that afternoon, the sun burned against my skin, but instead of feeling alive, I just felt empty. Liam and I tossed a football along the shore, laughing as we shared silly memories from his childhood. For a moment, I turned away, and then he was there, gently spreading sunscreen on my back. It was such a small, innocent gesture, full of care. But as the day went on, that moment stuck with me, refusing to fade. I realized how long it had been since anyone had touched me with that kind of tenderness, even in the smallest way. Matthew had taken that warmth away years ago, leaving behind only polite nods and distant chats. And now, in the simplest, most unexpected ways, Liam was filling the spaces his father had left behind. His easy words, his casual kindness, making me feel seen again in a way I hadn't for years. That realization scared me. The picnic I'd so carefully planned blurred into background noise. We sat side by side on the sand, as afternoon drifted into evening, the laughter of other families fading into the distance. I felt myself drifting, too, away from everything familiar, as if the tide was pulling me out to open water. The silence between us grew heavier, and with every minute, I had to face a truth I'd been avoiding. Whatever spark I'd once felt for Matthew was long gone. When he finally came home that night, tired and emotionally distant as always, he barely greeted us. He didn't ask about our day, or even seem to notice his son stepping into adulthood. I sat alone at the kitchen table, keenly aware of his absence, even as he moved around the house. I'd become invisible. Later, standing in front of his empty desk, I was flooded with old memories, dusty, forgotten versions of myself. I was angry, furious that I'd let things fall apart this way. Who had I become? The confident woman I used to be felt like a ghost, barely remembered. In that emptiness, I felt a desperate, almost painful need to be seen again, to matter, to feel important. That night, as I sat quietly on the couch, I caught Liam watching me. His gaze was steady, searching. In that instant, my heart raced faster than it had in years. His bright young eyes reminded me of all the hope and faith I'd lost along the way. And then, for just a heartbeat, everything changed. When his hand brushed my back again, just a simple touch, I felt something inside me break free. I told myself it was nothing, just a sweet, harmless moment. But as the day faded and the sky turned soft shades of pink and gold, I couldn't stop replaying it. Every glance, every innocent touch seemed to carry a weight neither of us dared to name. I sat in the passenger seat on the drive home, staring out at the endless stretch of highway. The ocean still shimmered in the rearview mirror as we drove away. Liam sat beside me, earbuds snug in, his ears, his head resting against the window. In that quiet car, he looked older. Not the child I'd raised, but a young man floating somewhere between boyhood and the full weight of adulthood. The realization crashed over me like a rogue wave. I was losing him. In the blink of an eye, he'd be gone, off to college or chasing his own life far from home. And yet, part of me wondered if that wasn't exactly what needed to happen, before things between us slipped too far out of control. As my thoughts tumbled and turned, I remembered the days when he was small, his tiny hand gripping mine, his laughter ringing out, bright and unguarded. Back then, life had been simple, full of purpose. When we finally pulled into the driveway, the house looked just as it always did, perfectly kept, every blade of grass in place, every window sparkling clean. But inside, it felt cold and lifeless, a beautiful shell with nothing real at its heart. That night, the silence in the house was almost unbearable. Matthew was shut away in his office, the low murmur of a conference call seeping faintly through the walls. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands wrapped tightly around a mug of coffee I wasn't drinking. I didn't hear Liam come in until he was suddenly right beside me, his presence silent, but impossible to ignore. Without a word, he sat across from me, his eyes locked onto mine. It was the kind of look that sent my heart racing in a way I couldn't explain, or maybe just didn't want to. The house was too quiet. The air between us was thick with things left unsaid, heavy and suffocating. I couldn't tell if it was the loneliness or the years of emotional neglect, but when his fingers brushed mine as I reached for the sugar, I didn't pull away. I should have, but I didn't. I let the moment stretch out longer than it should have, and in that silence, something wordless and dangerous passed between us. The weekend arrived, and a thick heat settled over the suburbs like a heavy blanket. Matthew was out of town on yet another business trip, and the house felt emptier than ever. I'm not sure what compelled me to suggest it. Maybe I just needed to breathe, to escape the walls that seemed to close in tighter every day. But I asked Liam if he wanted to head back to the beach. Our beach. He agreed without hesitation. The drive was quieter this time, more serious. Liam kept his headphones on, his gaze lost out the window. I stole glances at him when I thought he wasn't looking, wondering what was going through his mind. Did he feel it too? This tension neither of us could name but couldn't seem to escape. When we arrived, the beach was nearly empty. The early morning breeze carried the salty scent of the ocean, and for a moment, I could almost pretend everything was normal again. We laid out the towels side by side, just like last time. I stretched out on the warm sand, closing my eyes, trying to lose myself in the sound of the waves. But the weight of his gaze was still there, and deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before the fragile line we were both walking would snap completely. I tried to push the thoughts away, to focus on the sound of the waves and the warmth of the sun. But nothing could quiet the storm inside me. When I opened my eyes, Liam was sitting at the edge of the towel, his knees drawn up, staring out over the water. His profile looked older somehow, sharper in the golden morning light. I sat up slowly, brushing the sand from my arms. My heart pounded louder than the crash of the waves. I told myself to say something, anything, to break the heavy silence hanging between us, but the words stuck in my throat. It felt like the entire world had narrowed down to this quiet stretch of beach, to this impossible moment between us. Then, without even turning his head, Liam spoke softly, as if afraid of his own voice. "Do you ever feel like you're just disappearing?" I wasn't sure if the question was meant for me, or if he was just letting his thoughts drift out loud. But I knew that feeling all too well, all the time. I answered, my voice barely above a whisper, and just like that, something cracked open between us. He turned to me, his eyes meeting mine, and in them I saw a reflection of everything I'd buried for so long: loneliness, longing, and the terrible aching need to feel alive again. The sun was high overhead when I reached for the suntan lotion, not really thinking about what I was doing. My fingers trembled slightly as I held it out to him. "Could you?" I asked, my voice trailing off. He hesitated for just a second, his fingers brushing against mine as he took the bottle, and even that small touch felt electric. I lay back down on the towel, my heart thudding painfully against my ribs. His hands were careful, almost too careful, at first. He worked the lotion over my shoulders, his touch light and tentative, like he was scared of crossing some invisible line. And yet, with every passing second, his hands grew steadier, more sure of themselves. I closed my eyes and tried to pretend it meant nothing, that it was just a kind gesture, something innocent. But my body betrayed me. A shiver ran through me, despite the heat of the sun, and I knew he felt it too. He paused for a moment, his hands lingering just above the curve of my back, waiting, hesitating. I could have stopped him right then. I should have. But instead, in a voice barely audible, I whispered, "It's okay." Those two words felt heavier than anything I'd ever spoken, and in that moment, something shifted between us. His hands moved lower, slower, his touch no longer just innocent. My mind screamed at me to stop, to push him away. But my heart, my traitorous, lonely heart, wanted nothing more than to hold on to the warmth I hadn't felt in years. I told myself it was just the sun, just the tension of the last few days. But deep down, I knew the truth. When I finally opened my eyes and looked up at him, his face was a mixture of confusion and something else, something raw and real. Our eyes locked, and for a second, it felt like the entire world had gone silent. We were two people stranded in the same storm, reaching out for something, anything, that made us feel alive again. And that scared me more than anything. The drive. Home felt like it took hours. Even though the roads were empty and the distance short, neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick with everything we couldn't say, and every turn of the wheels seemed to bring the weight of what had happened crashing down harder. By the time we pulled into the driveway, the house looked colder than ever. The blinds were drawn, and the late afternoon sun barely managed to sneak through the edges. It felt like walking back into a prison I'd built myself, one of careful appearances and quiet misery. Matthew wasn't home yet. I stood in the kitchen, my hands resting on the cool marble counter, staring out through the window like the answers might be waiting for me somewhere beyond the horizon. Liam moved through the house quietly, his presence lingering even after he disappeared down the hallway. And even though I couldn't see him, I felt his thoughts just as clearly as my own. Tangled, restless, and dangerously close to crossing lines we couldn't uncross. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, haunted by the feel of his hands on my skin and the way his eyes had looked at me, like I was the only person in the world who mattered. It had been years since anyone looked at me that way. I told myself it was nothing, a moment born from too many years of loneliness and neglect. But even as I repeated that lie, my heart ached for something more. The days that followed were filled with a strange, quiet tension. Liam moved through the house like a shadow, but his eyes never left me. When I cooked dinner, he was there. When I folded laundry, his gaze lingered from the hallway. He didn't say anything, but he didn't have to. One night, as I sat in the living room flipping through channels mindlessly, I felt his presence behind me before I even turned my head. The room felt warmer somehow, the air heavier. I should have told him to leave, to go upstairs and forget any of this had ever happened, but I didn't. I let the silence grow between us, let the heat settle in my chest, And that's when it happened. I felt his breath against my neck before I even realized he had moved closer. My body tensed, every nerve alive with warning. And something else. I whispered, almost pleading. I need to leave. But before I could take another breath, his lips brushed against my cheek. It was barely a kiss, just the faintest touch. But it broke everything. Before I knew it, I turned toward him and our lips met. It was wrong. So utterly. Completely wrong. But it felt like stepping out of a fog after years of being lost. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was awake. Every kiss tore down, walls I'd built around my heart. Every stolen second felt like a lifetime of buried desires rising to the surface. And in those dangerous, fleeting moments, I forgot about everything else. I forgot about Matthew. I forgot about who I was supposed to be. All I knew was that I didn't want it to end. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of guilt and longing. Every corner of the house seemed to hold a memory I wasn't ready to face. Every glance from Liam carried a silent question I didn't dare answer. And yet, I couldn't keep away. On the rare mornings when Matthew was home, his presence felt more like a formality than a comfort. He'd rush through his morning coffee, toss a half-hearted smile my way, and disappear out the door before the sun had fully risen. One morning, though, he surprised me. He stepped into the kitchen while I was buttering toast, placed a soft kiss on my cheek, and for a fleeting second, it felt like the warmth of spring sunlight after a long winter. But just as quickly, he was gone. His footsteps fading up the stairs, the front door slamming shut behind him. And just like that, the house fell back into its familiar hollow quiet. Moments later, Liam appeared, his footsteps nearly silent, as he moved into the kitchen. He stood by the window, the sunlight casting long shadows across his face. His eyes found mine, and in them I saw the same question lingering. What happens now? I wanted to tell him it was over, that whatever had sparked between us was a mistake, a moment of weakness we both needed to forget. But my heart refused to listen. The summer heat grew heavier with each passing day. Matthew left again on another business trip, and the house felt suffocating in his absence. That's when I felt it again. That overwhelming urge to escape. Let's go back to the beach, I heard myself say before I could even think about the consequences. Liam didn't ask why. He just nodded, grabbed his keys, and we were gone. The drive was quiet, but not the peaceful kind. There was a tension, simmering beneath the surface, thick and undeniable. When we arrived, the beach was almost empty, the wide stretch of sand bathed in a soft golden glow. We set up our towels just as before, but this time there was no playful laughter, no light-hearted conversation. I lay back, closing my eyes against the brightness of the sun, trying to pretend I could still feel normal, that my heart wasn't racing with every second. He sat so close. But then I felt it again. His presence, his gaze lingering on me like a touch I couldn't see but felt everywhere. I turned my head, and our eyes met. Neither of us spoke. He reached for my hand, his fingers brushing lightly against mine, and, just like before, I didn't pull away. I should have, but instead, I laced my fingers with his and squeezed gently, sealing a silent understanding between us. We were too far gone now. Time seemed as slow as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft streaks of orange and pink. The ocean breeze felt cooler now, but the heat between us lingered, heavy and undeniable. For a while, we didn't say a word. We just sat there, side by side, our hands still tangled together as the tide crept closer to our feet. I knew this couldn't last. Whatever this was, whatever fragile, dangerous bond had formed between us, It existed only in these stolen moments on this isolated stretch of beach, far from the real world. Soon we'd have to leave, face what we'd done. But for now, we let the silence hold us together. When we finally packed up and headed back to the car, the drive home was heavier than ever. Neither of us spoke, but every second felt like it, stretched on forever under the weight of everything we couldn't say. By the time we pulled into the driveway, the house looked exactly as it always did. Perfectly still, perfectly cold. And that's when the fear settled in deep. I had crossed a line I could never uncross, and no matter how much I tried to pretend it was a fleeting mistake, the truth lingered just beneath my skin. That night, as I lay in bed, the ceiling above me seemed impossibly far away. I heard Matthew's voice in his office downstairs, caught up in yet another late-night call, oblivious to the wreckage quietly unfolding in his own home. I wanted to cry, to scream, to rewind time and erase every wrong choice I'd made. But then I thought about Liam's eyes, how they looked at me like I mattered, like I was still someone worth loving. And that thought broke me all over again. Days passed, and life settled into a strange, unbearable rhythm. Matthew returned from his trip, but his presence was just another ghost in the house. He went through the motions, meals, work, sleep, without ever really seeing me. And every time his eyes slid past me, every time he walked out the door without a word, the walls between us grew higher. I caught Liam watching me from across the room more often now. His glances were longer, heavier with things left unsaid. And I didn't stop him. I should have pushed him away. I should have built those walls back up and locked every door behind them. But I didn't, because in some terrible broken part of me, I couldn't bear to lose the only warmth I had left. One evening, as the sun set in a haze of purple and gold, I stood by the window staring out at the horizon that once promised freedom, but now felt like a reminder of every choice I couldn't undo. Liam came to stand beside me, his reflection barely visible in the glass. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. I swallowed hard, my voice shaking as I answered. "I don't think I know what okay feels like anymore." His hand reached for mine again, and this time I didn't even hesitate. In that fragile, fading light, we stood there together. Two people caught in a storm neither of us knew how to survive. And for better or worse, I knew this moment would haunt me forever. If you've ever felt lost in your own life, or found yourself reaching for something, anything, that makes you feel alive again, maybe you understand a little of what this story is about. If you did, leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that dig deep into the heart of what it means to be human. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that change us the most.